I'm Cory Ames from Grow Ensemble, and in this Buy Ensemble review, where my goal is to help you make planet and people-friendly purchases, I'll explain my experience and opinion of the Lomi thus far. We'll talk briefly about what the Lomi is, how it works, and do a couple of trial Lomi cycles for you to see some real-time results. Let's get started. The Lomi is a countertop composter designed by Pila to rapidly break down your household organic waste into ready-to-use nutrient-rich fertilizer. That's right, Lomi isn't creating compost. The dirt Lomi produces, or what they call Lomi Earth, is, as they describe, more of a fertilizer, or as I've thought of it, a soil amendment. This amendment or fertilizer can be added in soil or an existing compost system, but we'll discuss that more later. So, how big is the Lomi? The Lomi is about 20 pounds and about the same size as a toaster oven. It's a reasonably large appliance. Using the Lomi is actually really easy. Add your food scraps, houseplant trimmings, whatever, until you reach the capacity line. For best results, make sure all scraps are well chopped up. Once you're there, add in a Lomi pod, a splash of water, and choose your cycle. In my experience, this has mainly been Eco Express. There are 3 Lomi modes to choose from. First, there's Eco Express. This mode takes roughly 3 to 5 hours, the shortest time of all modes, and requires the least energy. The Pila folks recommend using what's produced with this mode with your next Lomi cycle, or disposing of this in your green organics bin. Pila also suggests using this mode for cooked foods or other normal food waste. What's produced from the Eco Express mode is not recommended to use directly in the garden. Then there's the Grow mode. This mode takes roughly 16 to 20 hours, and as recommended by Pila, is meant for only fruit and vegetable waste, not bioplastics or cooked foods. If I had processed my cooked foods using the Eco Express mode already, I was fine using my Lomi dirt from that cycle for a future Grow mode. Grow mode is meant to run at a lower temperature, most likely why it takes so much longer, so that the greatest amount of beneficial microorganisms can be preserved. Lomi dirt produced from Grow mode can be added directly to the garden. Then the Lomi approved mode. This mode takes roughly 5 to 8 hours and is meant to process Lomi-approved bioplastics, such as the packaging that comes with the Lomi or a Pila phone case. They recommend running those Lomi-approved bioplastics with food waste at a 1 to 10 ratio, 1 being the Lomi-approved bioplastics. In each cycle, the Lomi is accelerating what happens normally in the composting process. The Lomi cycles are heating up your food waste and grinding it into smaller pieces, all things that naturally occur in decomposition, but at a much quicker rate using the Lomi. There are lists of do's and don'ts when it comes to adding in items to your Lomi, as well as which cycles to specifically use. For the sake of using our time effectively here, I'd recommend you check out the complete list directly from the folks at Pila, or check out our in-depth written review at growensemble.com. I will tell you, I've been adding things to my Lomi over the last 3 months without thinking much about it. In very small amounts, I've added butter and cooked potatoes to my Lomi, which are on their do not add list. I can't recall a cycle where those affected the outcomes negatively. I honestly surprised myself when fine-tuning my research for this review. I likewise wasn't too considerate with how limited the limited amounts of items were that I added into my Lomi. I wanted to test the Lomi for how convenient and easy to use it would be. One of my measures of success for a successful compost system: how much do you have to think about it? And despite what the charts might suggest provided by Lomi, I didn't think too hard about what I was adding to my Lomi. A definite pro for it. However, for the longevity of your machine, if you do get one, maybe best to follow their advice more closely than I have. Personally, I've found the Lomi to be an incredible machine. It's no joke. Hit the Eco Express mode on the Lomi, the default setting, after adding in your food scraps in a Lomi pod, Then roughly 4 hours later, you have a substance that's dry, mostly odor-free, and ready to add to your green bin or existing compost system. I've been really impressed with how well Lomi performs and all the different varieties of household organic waste I can put into it. The Lomi has come to become a useful complement to my greater compost system. However, I haven't found it to hold a high enough capacity or be able to compost everything I'd like to be used completely on its own. I've inevitably run into the scenario where the Lomi is full, but there's more food waste to add. While testing the Lomi, I've still been bokashi composting. So instead of letting my food waste sit around on the countertop or in the fridge to wait for space in the Lomi to free up, I've added excess food waste to that system, the bokashi system. I found Lomi to most deliver on its claims to convenience and cleanliness. Anyone who has used a normal compost caddy in their kitchen has run into fruit flies, some gross caddy cleanups, or folks in their household who don't want to take out the caddy and are fine letting the food scraps pile up so that the lid doesn't close fully. Lomi's lid is easy to open and seals airtight, although it beeps every time. If you can fit it on your kitchen countertop, you'll find little inconvenience to utilizing it, in my opinion. For my kitchen though, our countertop space is rather limited and the Lomi is quite sizable. So during my testing, I actually ended up relegating the Lomi to the garage on top of the washing machine. Of course, this made it far less convenient to use, but made the rest of the household happier with me. I threw all I could over roughly 3 months into the Lomi, and sure enough, it broke things down quite efficiently and effectively. Anytime there was a failure, it was because I added too much of a single thing, like an entire egg carton, for example, or if I didn't break down that thing well enough, especially if it was harder, like watermelon rinds or broccoli stems. Lomi cycles were mostly quiet, depending on what I had in the Lomi, but there was one night where the Lomi ran and my wife and I were convinced there was a dying cat somewhere outside our house. The Pila folks claim the Lomi is quieter or on par with the average dishwasher, which I'd say is true. I mostly ran the Lomi overnight, and when I did, it was rare that we heard anything at all. Any changes in energy usage were negligible. Lomi offers a useful chart and suggests that it would cost me in Texas about 7 cents per Lomi cycle on average. I ran cycles nearly every day, and so with a little math using Lomi's figures, using Lomi could have cost me roughly $1.60 to $1.75 per month. I routinely ran 2 Eco Express cycles, adding in food scraps each time, then finished with a grow mode cycle. With my finished dirt, I'd add it to my existing compost bin or add it directly into soil that I've been using for a lawn revitalization project. Once my Lomi pods run out and I need more filtering activated charcoal, I don't know if I'll re-up, to be honest, mostly because I have an existing compost system that I like, bokashi composting, and I see the Lomi as a fun addition to my composting system now, but maybe not essential. As well, I don't think the Lomi can conveniently keep up with the food waste a household of 4 creates, which will be our scenario in the near future. My food waste composting system currently. All this being said, I could see how the Lomi could be great for some people, particularly smaller households, 1 to 2 people, specifically those that might live in an apartment, and as well, folks who might be new to composting. But let me summarize some of my pros and cons to the Lomi Composter and then outline specifically, once again, who I think the Lomi would be best suited for. Pros: there's no mess. If the mess of keeping your food scraps in a countertop compost caddy is a big turnoff for you with composting, then I think the Lomi really solves this issue. The airtight seal makes the process odorless, except for when you open the lid. And having all the food scraps broken down inside the Lomi makes for a no mess cleanup after the Lomi cycle is finished. Despite being messy, having a countertop compost caddy to throw your scraps in is quite convenient. It's not convenient to unload your compost caddy depending on the situation, but adding the one-off banana peel or coffee grounds is a quick and easy task when all you have to do is pull off the lid. The Lomi offers similar convenience. After some use, screwing and unscrewing the Lomi lid is a breeze and nothing that deters you from adding anything new, unless you don't want to hear that beep every time you open the lid. That's hopefully something that they change in the future. However, comparing how the Lomi processes food scraps to how it's done in other composting methods, you are getting to use that valuable organic matter in your garden fast. For example, if you run an Eco Express cycle once a day for 2 days, then fill up the Lomi again and run your Grow cycle, you are getting a usable soil amendment in just about 3 to 4 days. With bokashi composting, the other fastest method I know of, you are getting a soil amendment in about 14 to 21 days, and after you fill your bokashi bin, then you're getting usable compost roughly 4 to 6 weeks after that. Let's talk about some cons. The Lomi is big. The Lomi is just about 20 pounds. It's the heaviest countertop appliance I own. It also takes up a lot of countertop space. Frankly, I disagree with their sales copy, small enough to put away. Not always having the Lomi plugged in and accessible sort of negates some of its utility. And as mentioned, it's pretty big. For much of my testing, my Lomi sat on a countertop in our kitchen. But within a couple weeks, as I mentioned earlier, I had to relegate the Lomi to the garage on top of our washing machine. Granted, our kitchen, designed in 1954, doesn't have the most open plan. But even still, after enough time, I couldn't justify the Lomi taking up the space it did in our kitchen. Including myself, we have a household of 3, soon to be 4. It's not uncommon for Lomi to fill up for us within a single day. Maybe we create a lot of food waste. Regardless, as is, Lomi couldn't serve as our only means to process food waste. Once it's filled, you can't access Lomi for as many hours as the cycle you choose to run. For the most part, that means if we want to always be able to use the Lomi, we can only use the Eco Express mode, turning it on right before we go to bed, or maybe right before we all leave the house for the day. Multiple times when testing the Grow mode, I had to make sure our bokashi bin was available. There are workarounds, of course, like keeping food scraps in a bag in the fridge until Lomi finishes its cycle, but personally, I prefer to set up these systems in the most convenient way possible. Sometimes my greater household won't comply. Lomi is a high price product, and it is not just one time either. I originally was an Indiegogo backer for the Lomi, and then Pila sent me one to test out. I've been connected with these folks for a while. I believe with the Indiegogo, I was able to purchase the Lomi for a little less than it's typically listed. However, something that's incredibly frustrating for me with the folks at Pila generally is that they run tons of promotions. And so you never really feel like you're paying a fair price. For example, at the moment I was doing my research for this, which was mid-November, they were already running a Black Friday sale at 50% off the Lomi Classic, which puts the Lomi at roughly $250. I think that's less than I paid for it as an early backer. I don't love promotions like this, especially at the frequency I've known Pila to run them, because what's actually full price? With so many discounts and promotions, especially at such high levels, 50% off? You can't help but feel like you're being taken for a sucker if you pay for something at full price. I get wary of companies running constant promotions and discounts. Am I ever really getting the best deal? Should I really buy now to get these savings? How can they afford to cut the price of their product by 50%? Something feels a bit suspect. And as is included in my definition of a sustainable product, that ideally the brand behind it should push to make the product as affordable and accessible as possible. For Pila, I can't help but question, on the flip side, how can they justify the much higher price if seemingly without issue they can slash that in half? That's a tangent for elsewhere on ethical marketing. Anyways, to use the Lomi, you need filters and their compost accelerator pods. At their best deal, currently, you can get 180 cycles worth of Lomi pods and activated charcoal to filter for $155. That's about 86 cents per cycle, excluding the energy costs mentioned earlier. If you run cycles 75% of days, I did more than that for my testing, that's 274 cycles in a single year. That would mean roughly $235.64 for Lomi pods and activated charcoal. So in the first year with Lomi, you'll spend over $500 easily, a bit high up front. Every year after, maybe about $235, more or less depending on how many cycles you run, or roughly $20 per month. Not terrible, but not nothing. If you do decide to get a Lomi, it does seem like continuing to remain subscribed, $60 every 3 months, is your best option. You'll get the various filters and Lomi pods shipped to you automatically, and that keeps extending your warranty past the standard 1 year. This also enables you to get a new Lomi device every 3 years. This does segue nicely to maybe our next con or question. When I was first doing the research for the review, I couldn't see any end-of-life plans for the Lomi easily listed on their site or FAQs, so I reached out to support to ask about the lifespan for Lomi and what happens afterwards. Support suggested that the Lomi should run for at least 5 years, which seems short. And after that, it's not clear what you do with your non-operational Lomi after. The trash? Although, again, worth mentioning, if you do remain a subscriber for the quarterly fee, you'll maintain a lifetime warranty and Pila will take care of any issues with the Lomi. However, let's hope that if you bought a Lomi today, 5 years from now, that Pila has figured out a recycling or a refurbishment program for Lomi. Surely far less complicated, but they have determined an end-of-life plan for their Pila cases. I'd expect they do the same here. Okay, my last con or question related to the Lomi is a bit more philosophical. This concept relates to permaculture, a field of thought around land and living systems management called appropriate technology. So, as is described in one of the many permaculture manuals, Practical Permaculture, an appropriate technology is one that the people who will be using it are able to understand, rebuild, repair, and recycle that technology. Ideally, the tool you're using is as easy to understand, to use, and to repair as possible without outside expertise or intervention. Why I like a real mower, for example, versus a gas-powered or electric mower, although maybe not as efficient, is that a real mower just requires some oil on the blades between uses and a sharpening every now and again. With a gas-powered mower or electric mower, if something broke down, I'm unfortunately not handy enough and would need some outside assistance. Not to mention the gas-powered mower needs gasoline and oil as well to run. So for the Lomi, likewise, if something breaks, this is a pretty complicated machine. I certainly wouldn't be able to repair it myself. So it would have to be sent back into Pila. Or worse, if you are past a warranty and decided not to maintain your Lomi subscription, maybe you are past the projected 5-year lifespan, you're just left with something to throw away. And if something happens to Pila as a company, who's gonna repair your Lomi? Other methods for composting, while maybe not as clean or convenient, are, in my opinion and philosophy, around problem solving and sustainable living generally, more enduring and frankly, more appropriate. All right, before we wrap up, let's get to a couple of example Lomi cycles.
All right, here in this first test, I just have a number of normal day-to-day things for us in our household. Have a couple of fridge clean out items, some refried beans, old sweet potatoes that didn't get eaten. Underneath there, have some leftover scraps from meals throughout the day from ourselves and our toddler, a couple of houseplant prunings and tea bag wrappers that I know to be compostable. And so with this, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in one of the Lomi pods and put on the Eco Express mode, which should take about 4 hours, but I'm doing this right before heading to bed, so we'll see how it looks in the morning. Okay, so you can see everything's pretty well broken up here. Maybe the only defined scraps are pieces of the tea bag wrappers, but everything's well broken down, maybe because those are industrially compostable. They wouldn't work in a Lomi system like this, but what you have here could, in theory, go to the green organics bin. Lomi recommends not putting something like this directly in the garden, but I would probably add this if I was going to take it out, put it into my compost bin. However, as they recommend getting the greatest diversity as a key to the highest quality Lomi, in quotes, dirt, I'm gonna leave this in here. We'll fill it up again. I'll show you what I fill it up with, and then we'll see what we get on the other side. Okay, test number 2. Got some holiday cookies that didn't get eaten. Our toddler's leftover hamburger from tonight's dinner, some peanut butter toast, more coffee grounds. Again, kind of just a normal day-to-day mixture of some raw produce, scraps, and cooked foods. So gonna hit this with Eco Express again, and we'll see how this comes out. As well, I left the product from the first test that I showed y'all just to keep that in this combination. So we'll see how this goes. Let's have a look. All right, again, everything broken down, but maybe the filters there might have me take a look at the brand I'm using. One thing for me with all my composting systems is some level of convenience. And so, separating the coffee grounds from the filters, not preferred. So it might be what I'm buying versus the Lomi. So we'll have to test that out in the future. But nonetheless, everything looking really well broken down here. Once again, after another Eco Express cycle on top of one previously run. Okay, final test. Here we got, again, just another collection of day-to-day items for us. You can see right on top, more coffee grounds. There's the skin of an avocado. We got a banana peel there, house plant, prunings. We have some scraps from dinner last night. And it's much of the same throughout, but now there's 2 layers of what were the results of the previous 2 Lomi Eco Express cycles. So still, given that there's cooked foods in here, I guess I can't run the Lomi Grow mode, which they recommend using for mostly just raw, produce or organic matter versus anything processed or cooked. So, here still got to use Eco Express, and you can see I'm above the capacity line. And so we'll see what happens with that. But this would be something that I'm going to unload after. So we'll see. Okay, opening up the 3rd and final test. Looks like we still got some stuff here, the coffee filter and the skin of the avocado. That might be the result, to be honest, of not fully playing by the rules of what to put in the Lomi. But everything else looks pretty well broken up. And since I will be adding this to an existing compost system, this is not necessarily a deterrent to me doing so, but something to keep in mind, about how strictly you comply with Lomi's rules. That might affect getting the greatest longevity out of your machine, and likewise to the best end result. So 3 Eco Express modes. Found it a bit difficult to give y'all a full grow mode, without disrupting the normal day-to-day routine for us, just because these are the things that we need to put in our Lomi on a day-to-day basis. But with this result here, I'd go ahead and unload this into our existing compost bin. Let's go ahead and wrap things up.
So, all this taken together, do I believe the Lomi Composter is worth it? I'd say for some people, no. And for others, yeah. I think the Lomi Composter is best for someone living in a small space, an apartment dweller, or a small household. As well, I could see the Lomi being really valuable for someone in colder climates who has limited composting options or no citywide green bin collection during the winter months. You could use the Lomi all winter, either using it for houseplants or collect the Lomi dirt in a bucket mixed with some soil. Spring comes and it's ready for your garden. Also, I'd add, if you getting a Lomi is the difference between you processing your food scraps the most sustainable way or just tossing them in the garbage, get the Lomi. I think the Lomi has the opportunity to be a great gateway to composting. Composting is extremely important. So this is about finding the right system for you. If Annie, my wife, and I were still living in an apartment as we were in Boston, I could see the Lomi being more valuable, despite our lack of square footage. Now, in a much larger space with an established composting system that I like, the Lomi makes less sense. We do have a guest house on our property where we welcome a lot of guests, and I plan to keep the Lomi long-term there as an easier, cleaner introduction to composting for our many visitors. Either way, I would still have to think twice about the cost. I do hope, for the sake of their impact, Pila is able to find a way to make the Lomi and all the add-ons much more affordable in the coming years, without all the manipulative and distrusting discounting tactics and promotions. Not to mention increasing the projected lifespan of these products and determining a very clear end of life. If you end up getting the Lomi or have one already, be sure to let me know what you think with a comment below. And if you are curious as to how I evaluate products, the process behind a video like this, I recommend checking out my complete guide on what is a sustainable product. All right, y'all, that's a wrap on this by Ensemble review of the Lomi Classic Composter. If you enjoyed this review, then you might love my newsletter, the Weekly Ensemble, where with thousands of change makers, conscious consumers, and social entrepreneurs from all over the globe, we explore the art of living and working sustainably. To get the next email in your inbox, go to growensemble.com/newsletter.